All right, good evening. Welcome to the October 8th, 2024 Newmarket Planning Board meeting. We'll start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Before we start, I know Jane is not going to be here, and Scott is not going to be here, correct?
Yeah,
And Mikhail isn't here, so this is the group.
Bill will be in for.
Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in for? You're in for Jane.
There we go.
Perfect. Public comments. Seeing there is not a person out there, we'll close the public comment session at. I have 7:02. Whatever. Next is review and approval of minutes for August 13th. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Is motion to approve?
Yes, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 I'll
All those-
abstain.
You can still vote on minutes.
Oh, we can?
Yep.
Well, I didn't watch the meeting, so I'll abstain.
You watch the meeting.
I did watch the meeting.
You can vote on it.
All right. That's it. Aye.
So motion passes 4-0 with
One.
Val Shelton abstaining. Next is review and discussion on proposed zoning amendments. Bart, why don't we start with you
Sure.
giving us an update, and I think you had mentioned earlier about another grant,
Yeah.
potential grant, so
So
that may impact this.
Yep, for sure. So I'm going to just go over, what you have in front of you in your packet is a form-based code that was presented to you in, I believe it was July, in August. And I think you might want to take a look at that one more time because a couple of members weren't here in August. We didn't meet in September. So Bill and Val, if you had any comments, because you haven't really had time to discuss or give your points. I do have your notes, Bill, and Val, yours as well, so kind of use as a tip sheet. So I think that's a good first step moving forward. Also, you have in your packets our school. I think as we go along with this conversation, we're going to have to talk about school enrollment. So you have last year's projection. I will get next year's projection soon from the school district for projected enrollments. And also there's a report from New Hampshire Housing that showcases 4 different communities on correlation between enrollment and types of dwelling units and what they're seeing in different communities.
That was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I read the executive summary.
Yeah,
last
right.
night,
That's
and
what I have
it's-
printed in front of you, and
it's,
I didn't want to print out the 171
Yeah.
pages for you. So,
It's very interesting.
but if you do want it, I can help you out. Next is the grant proposal that we submitted last Monday, 2 Mondays ago, excuse me. We can go over that and kind of like set us up for this discussion on, as we're looking, if we were to change the zoning and we're developing larger parcels, what should the town's approach be? In that type of review. So I have a couple of suggestions that we may want to think about.
You said that's part of our packet.
Yep, it's right here. So I got one right here, it looks like this. I took it from the Seacoast local, it's the Fort Rock development.
Oh, okay.
And then the other in front of you is what I think they shut down, but it was a proposal in Laconia. What they were going to do at the state land there.
That Fort Rock one fell apart, right?
Yeah.
That's the one that fell apart?
Well, only because they didn't get the
Because of-
funding from one of the towns, right?
Well, that's the conservation.
No, I thought there was a property dispute with one of the owners.
Well, regardless,
Okay.
it's conceptually, it was just, it's more of like
Yes.
approach.
Yes.
They want
Yep.
more so than what they're proposing.
But, so your grant was regarding?
Our grant was guarded, I'll go over that.
Oh, okay.
So, well, part of the grant, part of it is gonna lead into this discussion right here.
Okay.
Which I'll, touch upon later. And then, this kind of goes to Bill comments, he sent me some comments, I got it right here for people, but, as we're looking to rezone some of these areas, we wanna make sure what's the capacity, what is the natural resource value, where's our infrastructure, does it make sense? This goes to like a build-out analysis. don't have that tonight, but I have to, kind of set it up for that, when we, for the next meeting. And also I have some, open space plan focus areas of the conservation, the open space plan. So, you kind of overlay everything and, kind of maybe leads us maybe to a conclusion. So, with all that, I think we'll just start with what we have in front for zoning language proposal. So, I know last time Jeff, Patrick, Eric, they had a chance to comment, so I kind of want to leave it to Val and Bill and have them share their thoughts right now, and just take it from there, if that's good with you.
Yeah, so
that's fine.
I keep coming back to, we still don't have the projection of the actual housing needs over the next, basically 20-year period as to, where do we, how many single families, condo, multifamily, et cetera. And I know that we're working on that, and Stratford Regional was trying to run some numbers. I haven't seen that, unless I just totally forgot about it.
Wasn't that in the
But-
housing?
Yeah, it was
In the housing?
700
Okay,
units.
so
to
700
2040.
units. And I think, just looking at this proposal, if you look at the unintended consequences, you would have, say, a 10-acre parcel, developable land of 10 acres, right, under the T4, 5,000 square foot lots, so you're in 6 units per lot, so that's 552 units on 10 acres. I don't think that's the intent of this, but that's exactly what could easily happen. On 10
Could-
acres, and you're looking at land here, you could easily, or even just take a 1 acre or 2 acre parcel along Scenic Bay Road. And now, are you taking down a single family that's gonna sell for $650 to $750, or maybe even $500 for some of the smaller ones? And now all of a sudden, you've got a $1.2 million lot to a developer because they'll take that down and put in 6 units. And they easily can tie to town water because it's right there now. And then do, one of the infrastructures on the sewer. I don't think we're thinking about, to Bill's point, build out. Or Patrick's, whoever had mentioned that.
And
So,
it's not just the build out and capacity, it's the aesthetics and the setting. And the visual that I have, best recent example of sort of high density multifamily development was on top of Hersey Lane with the row of duplex townhouses, which, looks okay there. It's startling. It kind of, it's not something we normally see. But it's okay. But if we did that on a 100-acre lot, with streets and streets of townhouses, just rows and rows, that would look.
Yeah, because you're gonna subdivide into 5,000 square foot lots,
Right.
right?
Well,
Because it's per lot.
I agree, but I think there's two things we need to think of, 2 areas, though, is there's the area that has sewer and the area that doesn't have sewer.
But, Mike,
'Cause you can't do any of that in the areas that don't have sewer.
no, but it's so easy to bring sewer to these areas that we're talking
Well,
about.
we need to think about that. Look, some of those areas we're talking about, yes, but on
And
the outskirts of town, no.
and some of it's already there, you're just extending it,
Right,
right?
right.
I just think that we're really not looking at the build-out picture, and whether it's from aesthetics or the fact that is it going to be an overburden on the systems? Because it's very easy to come up with a creative development, even on a 2-acre lot, and all of a sudden have 12 units.
2 buildings.
2 buildings.
Yeah.
To Bill's point, those are duplexes, but, look at some of the Sewell Farm condos. Or 12-foot condos, and they're 3 levels high. You could easily do that. Put 6 units on,
So I think the only-
12
yeah.
units on even an acre of land.
The
Because
only-
you're only using 10,000 square feet.
The only thing I would add to that discussion is there's other things they have to satisfy, like traffic impact. So I think there's gonna be other controls out there.
I think it's just gonna be this little incremental, all right, I'm gonna put in 12 units, okay, no, I don't need a traffic study, that's gonna be waived, what's 12 more, cars per day, or trips per day, or 20 trips per day, and then it's the next one, and then it's the next one. And then what is it? Okay, well, okay, I got mine, but you can't have yours, and now we're gonna change zoning again in 10 years? Because we didn't think about that? And is it gonna be the third person that's trying to do it on a single family that then is now gonna have to do an off-site improvement of a traffic light at the end of Bay Road or Dame Road?
So what are your thoughts on how to prevent that? Restrict the areas more significantly? Restrict
I think
the zone where you
there,
could do that to the
well,
urban core type of thing, or?
well, I think we want the redevelopment along the urban core, right? Everyone agrees with that. And then you've got, those lots have to also accommodate parking along the urban core. So you're constrained, and they're all smaller lots to begin with, right? You don't have acre lots along, well, exception of maybe a couple. So I think we're trying to redevelop the urban core, but then all of a sudden we get out to the T4, and it just somehow doesn't make sense to the extent of what could happen there. And should it happen there? Absolutely, we should figure out how to create more of these clustered communities and have obviously something, a better planned zoning than what we have currently now for our open space. And the developers will build under this open space method, but is it gonna be overbuilt? And I don't know if it's a minimum lot size, or is 6 units too much?
Well, so Bart, I know Bill had brought this up, and I think Jeff had at the last meeting. This new grant, are they part of that, what they're doing, taking a look at the build-out under some of these scenarios?
Yep. So basically, this new grant opportunity will be extending the process to the whole town. So we'll be rezoning the whole town. And then for each new zoning district, they would do the build-out analysis for each area, based on the parameters that were, through public input, through the whole process, the final recommendations they would do a new build-out analysis.
So is it safe to assume, though, that if we were to get that grant, we would start and focus on the urban core rezoning, which is what we started with, right? See what that rezoning and what the build-up would look like, and then...
Basically, we got the urban core right now in front of you, so I think the planning board can work on that.
Right.
And while we work, externally with the community and with consultation with the planning board on the other areas of town.
Well, the urban core still want to see some sort of build-out analysis, right?
Sure. Yeah.
As far as that goes,
Well,
that's what I'm
kinda-
talking about.
Yeah.
I know we've
So
talked
it's
about
gonna be,
it, but...
So it's not going to be as comprehensive as a typical bill analysis. I'll see if there's some flexibility, but it's going to be something similar with the housing chapter use the community biz. So maybe I can find some wiggle room to find some, get something that's, be a little more refined.
I don't know how refined it needs to be. I think I'm just looking for like baseline numbers, right? If this passes, if everything that's vacant got developed and...
Not vacant.
No, and
It's
now the
really
stuff got
talking about
redeveloped, and the other stuff got redeveloped, what does that look like as far as number of units?
Yep.
I think that is, what we have in front of us, it's kind of a math exercise.
It's mostly the T4.
Yeah, because I think the 108 corridor, and also let's keep in mind, we as a town have invested a lot into the 108 corridor, north and south, and there is the capacity there. So I don't think that the concern is much redevelopment on 108 as it is off 108.
So you're concerned about Bay Road side?
Not just Bay Road, and then I know we talked about
Mhm,
bringing it up
village.
here, and I agree with that, but then I'm starting to think about, oh my God, or even just transitionals, right? So you go from a 12 units on 1 acre to a single-family house. How's that good zoning? Because, where you're breaking all, the actual boundaries. And if we stay on Bay Road, and please for the public, I mean, I live at Moody Point, so I'm not trying to portray this as, not in my backyard idea. I'm really thinking about the build out and planning of where we are going to put houses, in the community, because obviously we need housing, but how to best do it and how to transition, from zone to zone, so that we're not impacting, obviously, people who are abutting these potential, zone changes. And especially on the scenic, roads, and it's not just Bay Road. But as it's proposed, that would absolutely happen, and from a real estate perspective, it would happen because you're incentivizing developers to buy existing single families, take those out of the inventory, and convert it over to more large-scale multifamilies. And I'm just not sure that's the right location.
So I think the objective will be then, where does that single-family and multifamily line occur? Because it's gonna be redeveloped, so I think the board needs to find out where that is.
And have these kind of developments kind of like, so that they really are buffered, right? They create their own communities by having a new road structure coming in, like we did with the golf course, and then building the communities there, as opposed to, and the incentives to build along the existing roads, and all of a sudden putting from a single family to 6 units. Or a single family to 20, to 12 units, especially if you don't have to put a road in. You're putting in 2 driveways.
And I think also too, there's a lot of single families scattered all across town because the town's 300 years old. So I have to think about the future. Where do you want that future line? Not just right now.
Right. Or how do you transition it? How do you...
So where's that transition
Is
line?
it 12 to 1? Or is it 12
Is it-
to 6 to a duplex to 1? Like, how does it transition?
So yeah, so that's why I would like the planning board to work on that.
Because I think it's a great idea to really figure out where we want housing and how to incentivize, because of the cost, to keep the cost down and provide what our town needs. Do we need single family? Do we need multifamily? Do we need apartments?
Are you trying to stay within the configuration of the existing lots in town?
No, this is,
No, I mean with the limits of your zoning.
with the limits of the
So
zoning.
if you say we're gonna make this area, single family, this area multi, clearly part of the drive, I believe, in pushing T4 out to the east was the fact that there's large undeveloped lots. And if you're gonna do that, are you gonna restrict the zoning by specific parcel? You know what I mean, by boundary? Like, we've done this by boundaries, right? But more generally,
by-
not by like an individual
Yeah.
parcel, right? And so, where are you gonna draw that line and
Or
where's
is
that
it
mixed
by
in?
acreage, like we have with our open space, where you need a minimum of X number of acres to do the open space plan? To be able to get that density, that could be a way to look at it.
Well, I think it should be by lot, by parcel. We should look at boundary lines on the, tax maps, and having lots that are in 2 or 3 different zones are a pain.
They
And
are.
a lot of towns have just drawn them, 400 feet off of this road is the line, and doesn't take into account what's in front or
Right.
behind it. So I think we're better off, whatever we do, is do it by the parcels. This whole parcel is in this zone, and that whole parcel is in another zone.
Or is it by buffers? Is it by, lot coverage?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you don't want to pick and choose the people who have the
Right.
ability to do it and not do it. And you don't want necessarily the current configuration of
I agree.
parcel boundaries to drive the future, when somebody could combine all these lots and cut it anywhere they want,
Right.
right?
But that's different,
but
right?
that's-
Than
yeah.
saying, okay, I've got the 1 acre, and I'll put 12 units on it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting, like, how do you
Well,
draw
that's
that
a
line?
lot,
So
yeah.
you're gonna have to exclude current single family from the new zoning, like any current single family or some, or if you're gonna try to build that fade or whatever you wanna call it, transition area.
I just think once we get off Main Street, or the collector streets to Main Street, because really that's how Main Street's gonna grow out, through the downtown. And then in the historic areas of what used to, right, New Village, Spring Street, Elm Street. I mean, they're really all collector towns, in it's higher density there. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I do think that there has to be some better transition, and whether that's through zoning or not including all the proposed. I think the reason that we see how it is proposed is because under the form-based zoning, Ivy really was pushing about, you don't want a street to create the boundary. You want that form-based zoning on both sides of the street. Well, maybe that's not the way to do it. Maybe that if it is in certain roads, you have the form-based zoning, but it's off-street, right? You can come in with a new road and do the form-based zone.
Fact of the
A
matter
couple
is,
of considerate, I mean, we could, have the developer do kind of a build-out analysis under a typical scenario, right? And set a kind of a increased density limit beyond the traditional, like
So,
50% or whatever.
As an overlay district, you're
no,
thinking?
not even overlay, it's a
Oh.
process, so we have this built into the grant, so part of it was more focused on larger parcels, but we developed a new ordinance, we call it master plan development, just made a title up, call it whatever you want. Basically, if it's over a certain size, it gives the planning board more authority on how that neighborhood looks like. So basically, the planning board becomes more collaborative with the developer on the layout. So, think of it like maybe as a PUD or something like that, conceptually, maybe not to that size, but that's what I was I really thought, about this too, and, with those larger developed parcels out there, like, it's really important that it's done correctly, so having some sort of zoning mechanism that allows for the planning board to really, dig its teeth into, what this development's gonna look like, and I thought would be super beneficial and reassuring, not only to the board, but the community.
I think Bill's idea was kind of interesting.
But maybe you could
the-
incorporate that.
Does it start with a yield plan and, based on the zoning matrix, right? Yield plan, and then you can do 50% more or whatever if you do whatever type of development. That way it's not open-ended, it's not open-ended, you can do whatever you can fit,
And to incentivize the protection of the resources on that particular
Sure.
land.
Sure. It's almost like a cluster type of thing.
Well, I think this is what the form base is proposing, is all cluster development. I'm just thinking, again,
Well,
as I keep reading through it, it's like, are we really thinking about what very much will happen? And is that what we were thinking was going to happen? I don't think any of us would have thought that.
yeah, I mean, what this is really proposing is cluster type development with no open space.
Yeah, but it's,
You know what I mean? It's cluster upon cluster upon cluster, so you don't have
but
the
they're
open space.
clusters on an acre or 2 acres.
Oh, right.
Or, to your point, putting acreage together and then not having to deal with new roads and putting in shared driveways.
Right.
I'm not sure that's what we were thinking. And I'm not sure that's how we need a number of housing units that we need. If we need 700 and something units, I'm not sure that's how the town would want to see the units being provided. When there's, I think, better planning options.
Yeah, and one question I had, Bart, in that housing chapter, that build-out analysis, that
Yeah.
map, that showed future homes location. I think it wasn't quite clear, how does that add up to the 700 units that we need? It didn't,
Yeah,
Show-
I think based on this zoning change, it did. I think we get to a certain number by a certain date, but we won't get to the set. So that's kind of like this next process, is, how do we achieve that throughout the whole town? How do we distribute that throughout the whole town?
and a lot of that development, and I'm kind of seeing some of the potential drawbacks of open space, like, most of the new development was down along New Road, because that's the last left open area, not open space, but, undeveloped area. And very little was developed between Grant Road and Ash Swamp and 152, because that's all tied up in open space.
Right.
And, that there's land out there, but do we want all our land, all our development to be down near the bay?
Yeah, I think the new road area we want to protect, you know, kind of going back to the conservation area, focus areas, the salt marsh migration. You know, that's definitely an area that I'm concerned, so I think we're gonna avoid anywhere, it'd be there. You know, just so there's opportunity to kind of create those buffers, natural buffers. You know, I think there's other opportunities in town where we could look at to add more housing.
And Bart, one of the things I know, you and I had talked about this, is that it's not directly related to this, but the new state board,
Yeah.
which I think, just as an aside,
Housing
we
Housing Appeal Board.
should probably have, if there's not anybody around, come in and talk to us about that.
Yeah, that might be.
Get educated, because that board is forcing towns to approve stuff that they've not approved.
Yeah, interesting, they speak before the Realtors Association
Oh,
often.
yeah.
And, because we have an appointee to the board.
Yeah.
Beth Fisher.
Okay, yeah.
So it's interesting how many appeals actually get, overturned or reversed by that board. However, it's definitely a much more expedited process. I don't know if Jeff, if anyone from your office has represented an applicant before the board. Their whole issue is about, you know, expediting the process as opposed to having to go to court. That's what that board is really about.
Yeah, but say, I know, for instance, there's a project in Seabrook where the zoning board did not grant the variance, and the board basically said to the town, you better grant the variance, and it was for 400 houses or something. If you don't grant the variance, we're gonna overturn it.
Yeah, but they're not just blanket overturning those
No,
for
oh,
housing.
no, I get that, but it's just something
Yeah.
else that we need to think about as we put this stuff together, because we could have the best laid plans, and somebody else could look at it differently.
And Bart, the only other thing from this review, and again, we're back on the T4. I'm not sure if I read this, if it's happening or it has happened. Is there a new law relative to zoning that a town is required to zone for mobile home parks? And if they don't, then they have to be permitted on any lot in the town? Have you read something
Yeah, I'm
about
not sure the
that?
exact language.
Something
yeah,
like that?
Something that has to be provided for. So I thought, we don't have an ordinance for park ordinance. We do permit them throughout town, but, yeah,
We permit them if they're on their own foundation in town.
they're permitted use in town. So building, yeah,
Mobile homes on their own foundation,
right.
as opposed to a mobile home park. And on a mobile home park, they don't have to be on a permanent foundation.
Right, so we don't have
That's
an
the
ordinance,
Newmarket.
we don't have an ordinance for park.
So, and again, I go back, and I know there was pushback on this. It would, in my opinion, I think our two mobile home parks that are both, I think, cooperatives, right, owned by the owners, which is a great thing, that we should carve those out and have them created as these two zones, that where the existing parks are zoned for mobile home parks. Then they're all conforming, that's what they're zoned for. So they're, because I can't even imagine a scenario where anyone would be able to, you know, acquire all of the
Units.
parcels, units
Yeah.
within the cooperative and then, you know, do a condominium development. But why aren't they, you know, why shouldn't they just have their own zone? It's what they are, then they're conforming. These are our Newmarket's two, you know, mobile home parks.
The only question I
Fortunately, they're
have about
cooperative.
that would be, is it just simply defined as a home that you don't have to build a foundation for? Or is there any other determining factor? I mean, there are like official classifications for what a mobile home is, like how it's constructed and all
correct.
that. The only thing I would say is we can't see what the future will be in manufactured housing. It's possible it will look different. And I wouldn't want to exclude those people if they have the opportunity to live in that park.
No, and I'm not being clear. So, there's manufactured housing,
Right.
right? Manufactured and then brought and,
Put on
erected
a
site.
foundation,
No,
right.
just erected on site, on a foundation, correct?
Right.
But in Newmarket, you also can have a mobile home, which comes on wheels, and you can set that on a lot in Newmarket as long as that is on a permanent foundation. And as an example, the one that's next to the railroad tracks as you're leaving town on the left. Okay, so that's a mobile home, not a manufactured home. It's a mobile home, and then it was physically set on the foundation because they had to put a foundation because that is required under the building. My point is more that we have two specific land areas in town that are mobile home parks.
Do we have three?
Three? Where's the
Do we
third
have
one?
do we have one on New Road?
152.
Is that one, is that one a
Oh, yeah, in
cooperative?
152,
Right by-
that would be
right
a,
And then the
Yeah.
one
Right.
Heron Point
Yes, that's right.
Estates, and then the one,
so three.
yeah, three.
Okay. So why aren't those areas where we see all the lots, why are they not zoned as mobile home park zones?
Is that spot zoning?
Is it?
Good question. I mean, I would kind of agree with Patrick. Why not afford them the opportunity to change if they want to?
But what are they changing to? I'm not saying they're
We
changing
don't know.
housing
We
styles.
That's what I'm
Whatever
saying, we
zoning
can't
is.
anticipate what that is, but I wouldn't wanna close it off from being, I almost wanna just say it's, maybe it could be zoned as community cooperatively owned or something like that, but maybe in the future they'll decide they wanna, cause those things have a lifespan unlike other houses that have a
Well, that's
longer
why
lifespan.
you're seeing them now being upgraded. It's removing the old ones, putting on new ones. and
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why they sell them for 200,000.
Oh, so what you're saying though is that you don't want to
Yeah.
include somebody from, say, buying two, taking them out, wanting to put a,
Or it
double
looks just
wide in there, a
different
different
than
type
what
of
we
unit. Yes.
think of as today.
yeah, that's a
Um,
good point.
or the community itself decides they want to go in a different direction because they are a co-op basically, right? It's almost like an apartment building that was owned cooperative. Well, they own that land cooperatively.
Right.
So they could decide to do something else.
They could decide
Theoretically.
to sell to a developer and have, what's that, probably 2 acres down at Heron Point, the Heron Point Park?
Yeah.
Okay, so, a couple acres, now you have, what, 5, so
Fifty
now we've got
units.
24, 36 units?
So you're saying
That's
the
really
zoning
tiny.
would protect that from
Right.
not happening?
Well, what's wrong with that, Val? I mean,
No, what's wrong with that? I think you have an affordable housing unit that is established, cooperatively owned, and would you want a developer coming in there and displacing,
They
the
can't displace
residents?
them unless every single one of them
Yeah.
agrees to
Yeah,
it.
it'd be
Right.
the
I'm not
choice
sure it's
of-
100%.
I believe it is.
Again, I don't know that
I don't know it either, but I believe it is.
Yeah, it's probably depends on whatever
Yeah.
agreement they made.
on the cooperative.
but if it,
I think it's worth looking at least, Bart,
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
what.
I just don't see it being T4.
Are you worried about the law, or are you worried about
No, I'm
future?
worried about creating zones in town that that protect the different type of housing styles that we need for people in the community. Okay, mobile homes provide an affordable alternative for many people who don't want to rent, like an apartment. Gives them their own single, family unit, but they're not like in a condo building or a multifamily, and their rent is their lot rent, but it's not their house rent, right? They own that. My point here is more about having a community of Newmarket that is inclusive of and has zoning for single families, multifamily apartments, condominiums, large scale, small scale, open space communities, mobile home parks, duplexes. That's kind of more my opinion about this, or what I'm trying to articulate.
We don't have
Obviously
zoning
not
that
very well.
But it's kinda-
excludes it though, right?
I think it's.
Like, we don't have zoning that is exclusionary of that use, right? Or do,
You can't put mobile home parks in.
You can't put a mobile home park in
so they'll
Newmarket.
never build a new one?
You do
Well-
manufactured housing, we don't necessarily, so.
Yeah, you can't do a
Park.
mobile home park in Newmarket.
There's no definition of park.
So
Correct.
if,
There's no
so-
zoning that allows a mobile
so
home
what's
park.
there is,
Basically,
Are they
have to
gonna stay or
subdivide
be
and put a
gone?
mobile home.
Yeah,
in each
so
lot.
if we have 3 of them, do we keep them there and protect them?
And we could allow for more too. I mean,
Your concern is the loss of the affordable housing?
But we're just hypothetically, say if they wanted to go in a different direction and build college clusters there, same, maybe a little bigger, maybe, 1,200 square feet,
That everyone that wants to sell their mobile home and be in a,
well, the cooperative would have to
Yeah.
agree to that, so, I mean,
They
they're
might
not,
make
again,
it a
I don't know
grant or
enough about the
something.
cooperative ownership as to number of boats,
right,
right?
I guess it's just providing opportunity. I understand where you come from, you're trying to, provide different housing types. for
That we
different folks.
have in town.
Yeah.
But they're all non-conforming, because there's no zoning that permits this in town. So all our parks are non-conforming under zoning. That's really more the, that's kind of where I'm coming from on it.
I'd be very curious of the opinion of the
Of
co-op
the people.
members.
Yeah, it would be great to hear
Yeah.
from some co-op members about this, because what their thoughts are on it.
Plan
So-
on, once this goes to public hearing, they're notifying every property owner, so, when we do these changes, even though we don't have to, but I think it's important.
well, I agree. So Bart, what are your thoughts on that new grant? You mentioned it. When do we know what's?
We'll know about it next month if we're successful, so the timeline, if we're successful in doing it, would be,
Yeah, but you're batting 1,000.
don't jinx it, pal.
Where's some good wood?
Yeah, exactly, it's your fault if we don't get it. We want that on the record.
I'll have to write the check, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so why are you looking for that anyways?
Yeah.
Just based on Val's
Basically, we're gonna
comments today.
start, if we get it, just because of grant logistics, we start in January to do the whole process, and then our end timeline is June. Finish up everything in June, have the draft and everything.
Right.
And I love the goal that Bart has is to have this consistency of zones as far as,
So,
But based on what your comments tonight, Val, making me rethink the whole thing. I gotta go back and reread it and look at it from that perspective, because that's not really how I looked at it.
and I'm not, and I'm only saying, are there things we need to tweak in it?
Sure.
Whether it's the districts that we're laying out, or
Or
this
even like-
idea of minimum lot size, and where does that apply?
But like Bill said, a good old-fashioned yield type plan to
Yeah.
be the baseline for everything.
I thought they were working on that for months and months. They kept saying we're gonna do a build-out analysis. We'll have it next month. I thought it was part of the previous study. That was,
Part of
parcel,
the
I think
housing.
just kind of parcel analysis,
Yeah.
you would do like spot parcel.
Like they did,
which
Ivy
they
went
did,
over them.
yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
they were doing a
not
full,
for every parcel.
for sure.
Yeah. But this grant, please bear with me. So, in the scope, we have the consult team will conduct a two-part parcel review process. Will analyze subject area parcels for potential development in alignment with the recently completed master plan in the first phase of the form-based code. This will inform subsequent code analysis and draft code. Once the draft of the proposed code is complete, SRPC will rerun townwide community viz analysis and test the potential housing development can increase the overall supply.
Do we have the ability through this process in New Hampshire to include an affordable housing component?
Workforce housing.
Well, yeah, but so in other words, you could have a zoning that says, here's your baseline, however,
I don't think
you
we
can
compel.
do 50%
I think we
more
can-
if you include workforce housing type of thing?
Yes, so we can incentivize that. I don't
That's
think
what
we
I'm talking-
can
yeah.
compel. Like
Oh,
this.
we can't compel?
Yeah.
That's
I
part of
think
our zoning?
incentivize it. So as a thought exercise, as I was thinking about this, I kind of,
Wait, can I just
Yeah.
recap Val's concerns? I mean, my main concerns were on the larger lots. what happens there, but you're also concerned about the type of density that happens on even some of the smaller lots, right? Am I saying that?
That's what I heard.
Right. And how it transitions from in between zones.
Okay.
So what I have there is kind of builds up that. I just took a stab at what the new zones would look like through this transition area. So we have in front of you is two maps. One, you know, the green is like the least dense. You got your rural zone, and then you transition into your more suburban, and then you get more dense as you get towards downtown. The other map behind it is basically, it breaks down by neighborhood. I just, you know, thinking about what the process is going to be, we're going to have different stakeholders and different opinions, and I just thought, well, maybe these will be the areas where there might be some nuance. So I just took, you know, just based on my knowledge and, you know, what I, you know, just thought could occur, that, you know, you would have these subzones, if you will, in there, and I kind of gave them names based on, you know, geographic areas and whatnot. So I just think different neighborhoods are going to have different, you know, ideas on how their neighborhoods should be, should evolve. So
These are great.
I'm gonna throw one thing out, just because I think it's getting included when maybe it shouldn't. This large parcel, I believe, is mostly, if not all, conservation right here.
I was going to
see
suggest that,
On the east side of the pits.
yeah,
All
you
this.
can still zone it, but it's conservation lands in perpetuity.
I think it would be
Yeah.
great to always hash mark out the
Yeah.
lots that can't be built on.
Okay.
It-
Yeah, I was just.
The reason I say that is because it isolates those skinny lots on the other side.
Yeah.
Between that and the other mobile home park.
Are you talking about the Boleo property?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the other mobile home park
So you,
right here.
just
Yeah,
seems,
no,
you know what I'm saying? It just seems
I
unnatural.
get that. No, I just thought as a zoning map, yeah. So,
No, I think that's good.
So I think what I would like for you all is thinking, what are those transition areas? You know, where should, you know, our more dense areas be? Where should it, you know, become less dense? You know, kind of like we've been doing with the T5, T4, and kind of, you know, extrapolate and go through town. I think that would kind of help as we, you know, go through this journey, if we get the money, you know, help us, you know, and then, like you said, we're going to go through all town, so we're going to try to get as much info as possible from everyone affected by this. So
Nice names, Bart.
yeah, okay. That's a little flavor, or Newmarket flavor to it. Tried it with. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're going.
Is there any way, this borrow question, but to revisit open space set-asides that have been set aside as developments? Because I'm thinking like, I think of the Durrell Woods open space.
Yeah.
Wasn't that parcel right at the elementary school, right across from the Pines, that field area, isn't that part of the open space?
Yeah, that got deeded to the town, didn't it?
Behind the elementary school
Fine.
I'm saying the
Was-
front, like,
was open space.
The hill, the knoll right behind it.
So
Yeah,
we
that
do
goes
have
out to-
a
yeah.
The drive
map
around,
of all the open
Yeah.
space.
Step-
The ledge cut,
It's in
right
the
up
open
up
space
on
plan.
top of
Yeah.
that.
I can share
Yes.
that with you.
And I think
Yes.
that got
Want that.
switched from
Yeah,
Durrell to the town.
wondering.
Yeah,
It's town now, because they were thinking of putting a
Yeah,
parking
that
lot
was a
up there.
flip we did when we did the school project.
That's right, we did a site walk out there and.
At one point, I remember they wanted the school
We did a site
wanted
walk.
to use that for
As a park-
as outdoor learning.
Yeah.
probably
Are you
15
thinking-
We
years,
surveyed it
20
for a
years ago.
parking lot, but they were like, there's too much ledge.
Right, that's, yeah,
Is there wetlands down there?
in the wetlands.
Yeah,
there's
there's
Because
wetland on the
And
other
it was
side
coming
there.
into moonlight, right?
Yeah,
There's
the
a
brook
culvert
is-
through there from the
Mhm.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Are you thinking more, Bill, of what are we gonna do with the open space lands?
Well, like
Park
I'm
parties.
thinking the lot right on Grant Road and the Durrell Woods, right where they're putting the sidewalk there.
Yeah.
There's that field, it's kind of with pine trees there that I think was part of the open space, but it's sort of never gonna be used. It's like just tied up.
Well,
That's what I
Are
wrote
you,
about.
but that was, I think all that was deeded to the town.
So what
That's
you're
an
saying
open
is,
space set aside.
right,
Well, it was the
To
open space
satisfy
for
the open
Durrell,
space.
and then either the homeowners
But-
association was supposed to take it,
so
or,
what you're saying is, should we, as a town, revisit the open space set-asides?
Yeah, that where it makes
of all these
sense.
open
Where it makes
space
sense.
developments? Oh, that's interesting.
Where it makes sense, where it was set aside, that is now very accessible and buildable. And I don't know, does anybody have any opposition to?
I have no problem with looking at it.
If we look at it, I think a lot of
Open
those
space.
spaces were, and what ends up being the open space is the unbuildable part of the
True.
lot. So it's
True.
usually a wetland or ledge or something else. Because I looked at a lot of them when I was on the Conservation Commission, and a lot of them you can't even walk hardly, they're
Yeah.
so wet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There-
years ago, that's
Right.
what it was. There was no requirement that you had to even give them any uplands. It was,
Right.
Just
now-
land,
nowadays, it's, you
acreage,
can't
right?
give them, whatever percentage on the total lot, you can't give them more than that. So you have to have some useful land. So the old ones, I absolutely agree, are probably all wetlands or ledge or basically unbuildable. But there might be some more recent ones that
Yeah,
have some land that's actually worth something. I don't know what the process would be to go through and change that. I think it's worth looking at. If we're talking about, kind of infill and stuff,
right.
some of that stuff would
If
be,
it's certainly an in-town area
Yeah.
that's buildable
Yeah.
and not, instead of spreading ourselves out
Mm-hmm.
further,
Or just fill them.
this is gonna be a
Just
10-year
fill all the
process the way
wetlands.
we're going.
I. Not the wetlands, but-
It
I-
doesn't need to be.
Are you thinking there'd be
No, I-
offsets or something? Like you would say, we'll take this 20 acres out and put this 20 acres in, or you think
No.
they'll just be gone?
I think he's saying it potentially could just be gone. If
Just
it's
be
a,
gone, not, I don't know, who does that penalize, if anybody? I don't know, the developer that had this put it aside a long time ago, that was, could have
Isn't it
used it.
deed restricted?
Well, I was gonna say, you'd have to go back and do a corrective, first you'd have to come back
Yeah.
and then reapprove an amended site plan, right, or development plan. And then you'd have to get whoever deeded the land over.
What happens to
To-
the density too, bonuses that you got for it? They
Oh.
become non-conforming at that point?
What made me think of it is just,
Yeah, that's a good
again,
one.
what I said earlier, that all the new development is going down closer to the bay, which is, we gotta think about that, like, is that what we really want? Or do we want to try to bring it back in the infill closer to town?
No, I think yeah.
I mean, what are people
Trying to
gonna
do that.
want? Where are people gonna wanna live?
well, all
Well,
things
we
being
had
equal,
the charrette, and that's, we pretty much know from, very few people, obviously, relative to a percentage of the town, but those who did show up were pretty vocal about where they think development should go.
Like right there.
But all things being equal, people wanna live on New Road. If you have views of the bay or the marsh or whatever, that's highest priced land.
Right, so I think they'd build in both places, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's why I was wondering if you're thinking of doing trade-offs. Like say, hey, you wanna develop this piece of former open space in the middle of downtown, then the town will grant it to you if you purchase 20 acres of land on New Road and put it in conservation.
that's
I don't
a good
know.
thought. I mean,
It's
Yeah, no, that's.
Well, Dover has some kind of, what is that called,
Transfer development rights. So basically, developer comes into the Conservation Commission, says, I need X amount of units. They're like, okay, pay up. And then that fund goes to the conservation fund, and that money's spent towards conservation purposes.
Because you might be able to pair that with some of the maps that we've developed through the master plan process and say, this isn't conservation, but all the conservation groups, besides the things that live there, see it as low-value conservation land or
Right.
right,
low-value habitat.
right,
And over here is a bunch of developable, very high-value habitat. So
exactly.
then you get trade-off,
Yep.
one for the other. And that'd be, I think from my perspective, it'd be hard to convince me, not that I'm the only member on the board, that it'd be a good idea to remove a bunch of open space, because it does have value.
Well, it has
Um,
drainage value too, I think a lot of
yeah.
it, right, off of these developed lands.
Yeah, it has numerous values.
There may be
Right,
not
so-
too many examples, but that one, and I'm thinking, that's
Yeah.
right next to elementary school, I mean, if that's never development, it's a perfect space to have some sort of development.
Right.
You know, it's got all the town infrastructure, the sidewalks are there.
That's something we could do, probably at a different time, do some research on and find out where all those open space parcels are and
We have
what they look like. I know we have them, but
And they're everywhere, right?
they are.
There's Maston Drive,
They are.
there's,
Yeah.
the other one off Backus Falls Road has open space.
Yeah.
Part of our
Up behind me is open space off
Right.
vision
No.
too is how do we connect these open spaces, you know, like with, you know, connectivity trails and whatnot,
Mm.
which I think would bring a lot of value as well. If we can do that somehow, I think we're working towards that. I think it's more, we learn from the past and how can we create new ordinances that is a new open, maybe a new open space ordinance that, you know, avoids these pitfalls.
Right, and I think we learned from the South Main Street project, right? So the elderly ordinance there, I mean, the reason that it was so dense is because you were able to use all the buffers. So if you develop that right as not elderly housing, I think what did we figure out, maybe 4 or 5 units, not 30-something. Because under the conventional subdivision plan and development plan, you had to account for all the buffers. Under the elderly, you know, there was nothing about buffers, it was just the wetlands under the affordable elderly.
Right.
So it's like, that was a live and learn, right?
Yeah, so we were trying to encourage elderly, so we might have went a little too far. And then it got-
Well, I think from a property dependent, I don't think anybody was really thinking about that 20 years ago, and I think that's when the ordinance was developed
Yeah,
and Clay
about
was
that,
here. And it was like, we just want some affordable elderly housing in town, let's figure out where we want it, right? South
we
Main,
got the same
Main,
issue
Exeter
when we're
Road,
looking at T4 and T5, right?
and maybe
What are the
it wasn't poorly
unintended
drained 20 years
consequences?
ago.
Exactly.
Well,
I think we have some opportunities. Eric's you know, right now people can go into these properties and develop them if they want to, and we have less control on what that looks like. I think we need to. I think it behooves us to really, you know, make recommendations, at least the plan board, to, you know, kind of give that control to the town, and what you know, what that looks like.
yeah,
You know, have a lot more say on how it is going to evolve.
But we need to have the conversations about the unintended consequences.
I agree. That's part of it.
Because
Yeah.
developers look at things differently than we do.
and understand that the developers are not in there right now because it doesn't make financially sense to do it under the current zoning. That's where we're at it as a town.
Yeah, it probably would make sense with the zoning if there was sewer out there, but without sewer, it's impractical.
my point.
Because of wetlands
Right.
and all that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. Right, so, Bart, where do we go from here? We're gonna talk about this, I mean, I gotta reread this and look at it from Val's perspective about,
I think
Yeah, look
two
at what
things, reread it, look at the dimensions, look at the geography, you know, where is the delineation of T4, where should that end? Or if it, where the state is saying, what would the dimensions, how would they change, you know, to create that transition, that, you know, that density transition. I think that would be a good first step. And just to, you know, move conversation forward, because we need boundaries, we need to know.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
then boundaries, and then, you know, what those dimensions are, and I think that'd be a good first step to, you know, go forward.
yeah, we need some sort of, ultimately, we need some sort of build-out analysis, even if it's not,
Yeah, and
you know,
I will try to put some together for November, so, like some. you know,
very
analysis.
rudimentary, it doesn't
Yeah,
have to be a
right.
whole lot, just
Right.
here's, you know,
Yep.
here's what we have. You know, because if it becomes feasible, developers will go out and buy 3 or 4 houses and knock them all down and put up 60 units if they can. We wouldn't be the first time if that happened, and, you know, so.
I ask
It's not like you need a lot of land to do it.
Right.
What is the status of this big, large lot out on New Road what's his name? Used to-
Wilson Farm?
You took the town owned
big-
or the Labonte?
Labonte.
They still hold
Heard
it.
anything, really.
I mean, he has passed away, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's sitting in his heirs. And
Right.
No, it's owned by the family.
Alrighty.
Yeah, so yeah, so.
It's multiple parcels.
Mhm. Someday,
Why
somebody's
is
gonna
one-
come in
why-
on
Some of it's.
Yeah,
development
it's just,
on that.
it's
Oh,
just,
absolutely.
It didn't print,
it's
Seems
but
like a
it's-
lot here.
it's there, that'd be part of it.
Absolutely, you're right.
This seems like a lot, I know, with land.
All right, does anybody have anything else they wanna get out tonight?
I had one thing I wanted to ask people's opinion on. Our wetland overlay district and the boundaries of it. So the wetland overlay district and they're buffers, right? And 25 and 50-foot buffer. And if they're being treated as buffers or if they're being treated as setbacks, and there's a very big difference, right? With a setback, you can do work over the setback as long as your final structure doesn't go over the setback. You can do earthwork, you can do all sorts of stuff within a setback. But within a vegetated buffer, you really can't do anything, right? You can't disturb the soil.
do you have a particular development that you're thinking of right now?
No, no.
Okay.
Not one bit, no. I'm just thinking in general. Is it adequate to have just a buffer, or should there be some sort of additional setback for a building, for a structure that's beyond the buffer to ensure buffer's not impacted? Or, anywhere in town in the last 20 years or ever since the wetland overlay district has been installed, I mean, if technically you could put a building right up to a buffer, right? Anything, shed, something or other, but there's going to be maybe it's a vegetated lot that they want to clear to build a house on, completely wooded. You're not going to build a house 20, like 5 feet off a buffer edge, because maybe, or 10 feet off a buffer edge, because you might be able to squeak in a foundation or whatever, and not go into that buffer and start cutting trees back, right, to make room for your house. Otherwise, you might have tree branches up against your back of your house, right? So I didn't know if people had thought of this, or maybe entertain the fact that maybe you have a 35-foot an additional building setback beyond the buffer limit.
So
But the whole.
that's what Hampton does. Hampton has,
A setback to a buffer?
they have a setback to a buffer, which I do not support. If we want to make the buffers bigger, that's a different story, but Hampton has like a 50-foot buffer, then a 12-foot setback to the buffer. So they really have a 62-foot buffer.
So people don't impact the buffer,
Right,
because if
right.
you do, you've
Right.
violated the ordinance.
Maybe.
The whole conversation about South Main was, how are you gonna put a piece of equipment back there to actually build the building or reside it in the future? Because, again, they were just feet away from the buffer with the foundation. Now, I do see, did they actually have the boundary of the wetland surveyed? And then that's where the fence or whatever was put up?
Yeah,
The erosion control?
Yeah,
Because to your
and-
point,
and
Jeff,
that's
how
not
are
the
they
road,
building
yeah,
that and not
yeah.
impacting the buffer? Not
Yeah.
the buffer, right?
And like literally,
Or
I
the
was
wetland.
not thinking about that project.
No,
when
I
when
understand,
went
but
with
that's
this,
the
but
point when
yeah,
we were
that is the
discussing
exact
it.
point,
Because
yeah.
how can you not impact it if you're building right to it? Like from a
Right.
common sense standpoint.
Right, and the ordinance says you can't do any work within the buffer relating to construction. And I'm not saying everyone treats a buffer as perfect, and maybe I'm not perfect with buffers around my house, right? But I'm just saying, like, in general, if you're gonna allow a new subdivision, say, to go into a wooded area, are we enforcing our buffer the way it should be? Is it meeting the intent of the buffer if people are not respecting it? And, the setback would be a setback as opposed to a buffer, right?
Right.
So Hampton must have done, but I was thinking of this, I'm like, how do you even come up with a standard? Who knows what someone's gonna build? Who knows how wide of a footing they need? Who knows how big of a trench they have to dig, depending on the, like, who knows what's there? And so I didn't know Hampton had a 12-foot one, but how did they come up with 12 feet?
Like, most buffers are just made up, right? It's
Well,
a,
is it
Well, no,
12
not
feet? You got a
necessarily.
24
It's
foot
made up,
road,
but-
so you figure at least 12 feet you can get a vehicle behind it. Isn't it really all about construction and having the ability to,
I
you
don't
know,
know.
to
I
implement
don't know how they,
construction?
I don't know how they made it up. I don't know. how they made
That
it.
just seems like a, yeah, we can get a vehicle back there.
I mean, any setback or buffer is made up by people, but
Oh, absolutely.
they do use logic and science to determine, for wetlands and habitat and light penetration into what used to be forest and things like
Yeah.
that. Like there is reasoning behind it, but so I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about.
Jeff, we are part of this whole process, we're gonna look at the whole zoning ordinance. So there'll be opportunities to talk about that further.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Just
No, I'm just saying, like, I think it's a good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I would support strengthening the language of buffers that you know exactly what can and can't be done, as opposed to adding
I
a
don't think we
setback to it.
we don't wanna make it more complicated too.
Some deal with very complicated things in
Yeah.
life. I'm not worried about,
No,
not worried
yeah,
about
exactly.
complication. It's just 10
No,
more feet.
exactly.
Yeah, I know, but it's, not everyone's used to reading these things. So I think part of this is to make it more accessible as well. So if we can make it maybe easier, maybe it's a 100-foot setback, just example. That's easier to understand and say, all right, you got this 50-foot buffer based on hydric soils B, but then after that you gotta have 12 feet. I think it's just easier maybe just to, rationally find what that number should be and then stick to one number. That's just my opinion.
You lose the teeth of one or the other in the compromise, I think. Because you'll lose the teeth of a buffer if it's just a setback, right?
But couldn't you
And if you
incorporate?
increase the buffer, you don't get the protection of the setback for the buffer.
No,
so-
your point is to protect the buffer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
if it's a setback, there's no buffer. You can do whatever you want within this. You can go trim trees within a setback. You just can't build within it, right? You can go clear vegetation. So if you want a buffer, you want to protect the actual buffer.
Yeah,
Right,
but,
you-
but
you-
where do you end on the scenario when you were talking about trees, because the trees are right up against the building, right?
Right, so then you put the
got a
setback.
12-foot setback,
Right.
you're building to the setback, but yet you're not being allowed to cut the trees. So now all of a sudden the 12 feet goes to, whatever, 16 feet because you want to cut the trees.
Yeah, it's never going to go to, what, 110 feet, the height
Right,
of
it's gonna be
the
whatever
tallest
the
white pine around. I mean,
reasonableness is.
Right.
yeah.
It's interesting.
But I thought you couldn't cut vegetation in the buffer.
You're not
In
supposed
the
to.
buffer.
So regardless of where you put your building, you're not
Right.
supposed to cut the vegetation so
Correct.
that you can build the building, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But your building is at the buffer.
So maybe it's on, I mean, that's the thing, like, does the planning board have a means, a means to say, I know the buffer's 25 feet and you can build a building at 26, but we don't think you can, you know what I mean? Like, now, but once you approve, you know what I mean? Like, no, build it 10 more feet further away from the buffer so that you have room to build it, and be like, no. you
I
can't.
think we have the right to say, I think we'd have a right to say no to that if it was our opinion that they couldn't build it without negatively impacting the buffer.
We discussed that on applications.
You know, so-
Because that was the question. You can go to the record. How are you gonna build this building when you're right up against the wetland? Or the buffer, whatever, we had on there, right? How are you gonna physically build it was the question.
Yeah, if it's a buffer that's all shrub,
It was like 2 or 3
bushes
feet.
and everything,
You
and
can't, like,
how can you
Yeah.
get around to that side if you're up against it to build? We can say,
Right.
no, you can't do that without disturbing the buffer, or show us how you're gonna do it. You're gonna bring a crane in and aerial everything in?
So my point is you can, and this would be like we shall, right? If you have the setback and the addition to the buffer, and you have the protection and don't have to argue out the protection. You know what I mean?
no different than a setback to a property line. You're treating like the
What about
buffer as
restoration?
a line.
If they had a restoration plan, at the impact of that, which I think the ordinance allows for. You know, or is it already devalued because you disturbed it?
I think that, you know,
Does it lose its value?
right, I think that restoration can be done, but it depends on the impact that you do. I mean, if you went, extreme example, you cleared an acre of trees in a buffer, you're really, restoration of that's, it's gonna take 200 years to restore. To,
Right.
you know, the soils back to the way they were, and then the trees, I mean, so it went on down the road, down 152, further out, years ago.
Yep.
I think that still looks the same as it did
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago.
Yep.
I don't remember that.
Yep.
All right, what's the timing on the, finishing the housing
Yeah.
chapter?
That's basically in kind of draft form, so what we're doing with the other chapters, we're catching up. So you can still, there's still time to comment on it. So if you want to take a, you know, if you have comments to provide, we still have that opportunity because we haven't had the public hearing yet, so.
Yeah, I guess my main comment, I guess I can submit it again, was just, you know, how does that map compare to the number of units that projected to be needed, you know? What's shown on that map, is that equal to 750 units that projected to be needed? Is that,
We have to
and it'd be nice if they had a listing of the proposed buildings by a street address, so that you could see
Yeah,
where all
the number of units,
Yeah.
so you know, does it add up to 750 or not?
right.
Yep.
See what the limitations are of that program, so I'll look at that.
I mean, they must have figured out somehow these locations, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did it more so by district than street, so, but anyways, yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, the 750 was the need for
The need.
protection.
But if
I'll
we're only
give-
showing 350 on the map, you know.
Oh, no, I'll give you the 3 lots where they can put it. Of all the lots in town, you could put it all on 3. Those units.
I'm not following you.
Because your point is, where can they go?
Yes,
Yeah, I can give you 3 lots where they can all go.
yes,
That, you know,
right,
to the point.
which would make sense.
Right. All right, does anybody have anything else to add?
Yeah, I do.
Bart?
Uh,
I just saw that.
Design charrette, October 18th. So basically, for plan board, if you want to come as a plan board member, we're gonna have a 12 settings, 1:30 to 3:30. So if you want to be part of that conversation, or if you want to come as a general public, and you come to either the first listening session will be 3:30 to 5, or the second, 6:30 to 8. On Friday, October 18th, will be in the town hall downstairs in the auditorium. So just 2 different caps you'll be wearing depending on which session you go to. And then on Saturday, October 19th, during the day, the team will be from Plan New Hampshire working on what they heard and developing recommendations. And there'll be a presentation at 3 p.m. Auditorium. We'll also be recording that too, so if you're unable to make it, then you can watch it at your own leisure.
Excellent. Thank you,
So if
Bart.
we want to come to the 1 to 3 session, we just show up?
Yep, you show up downstairs.
1 to 3 or 1:30?
1:30.
So if you want a bridge from Warren Point to Shanda Park,
Or you want to brainstorm on how to do
chance.
that.
or maybe a little ferry.
Oh, now you're talking. Like the
A lawn-
Kennebec
a
ferries,
lawn
'cause
stick.
someone with a canoe, that's all you need. Ferry.
All righty. Good,
Zip
Bart?
line.
Anybody have anything else they'd
Basket.
like to add?
The Lighthouses.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion
Yeah,
to adjourn.
no
Motion
motion.
to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Make sure you